Well, welcome, LGM sisters and other sisters joining us. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Beth from Little World Wonders. If you don't know who she is by now, Beth is a Christ-loving homeschool mom of two who inspires countless of women to pursue a living and life-giving education, not only for themselves, but for their children. I follow her on Instagram for years and fell in love with her immediately because whatever she puts out is so beautiful, true, good, and just wonderful. And then I had the pleasure of meeting her at the CMI conference, and it only confirmed what I already knew that she's amazing and you want to have her in your circle. So Beth's talk today is titled Nourishing a Mother's Heart Through the Advent Season. She'll guide us through how to embrace the hopeful anticipation of Advent, even when the holiday season feels overwhelming. And her insights and her resources that she'll share with you today will help us create a home that reflects the beauty and joy um, of this season. So, welcome, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Like Anna said, I'm Beth. I'm a homeschooling mom of two kids, ages 11. This past weekend, she just turned 11, and I have a 5-year-old son. Um, we live just south of Denver, Colorado, so I post pictures of snow in March and May and snow in November. Um, I am the owner and operator of Little World Wanderers, which is a Charlotte Mason curriculum company. And I've been running this company for I started writing 6 years ago and started actively sharing my work about 5 years ago. So I'm going to kind of talk about my backstory a little bit and what I do as a homeschooling mom, but just as a person during the Advent season. So, my daughter was born around Thanksgiving 11 years ago in Colorado Springs. um, it snowed the week before she was born and the week after. And this is something that I had never experienced in my 24 years of life. Up until this point, I hadn't seen snow in November. Everything was cold and quiet and reflective. And I spent a lot of that first Christmas season thinking about Mary, the mother of Jesus, while I nursed my tiny new baby. And it's probably my ignorance, but I never paid attention to Mary before. Um, and then I became a mom. And suddenly I felt this kinship with a woman who lived 2,000 years before. And as churchgoers around me sang, Mary, did you know, on Christmas Eve, I thought about how much she knew. She knew about the labor pains that I experienced. She knew the sleepless nights. She nursed a baby, and she probably checked on his breathing. And I thought back to my own labor and what a gift it was that God gave us this woman who intimately knew the struggle it took to bring a life into this world. Biblical scholars tell us it likely took Mary and Joseph about 4 days to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. But biblical scholars are not often women in their ninth month of pregnancy. The 10-minute ride from the apartment to the hospital felt like an eternity, and I prayed that I would not give birth to my daughter in the front seat of our Saturn Ion. She was born 29 hours later, so I was completely in the safe zone. But I think about how Mary probably took a lot of rest breaks, and I think that she might have prayed that she wouldn't give birth on the side of a dusty road, even though she had a prophecy knowing her baby would be born in Bethlehem. She probably felt very afraid. The world Jesus was born into was dark, sinful, and broken. The voice of God had been silent for approximately 400 years, and there was an anticipation of hope in a coming Messiah. We know from reading history that there's nothing new under the sun, and we currently live in a dark, sinful, and broken world. We live in a world that compels us to distraction, to busyness, and discontent. We're often flooded with the latest Christmas school curriculum, the viral Christmas tree that is ever so slightly different than last year's viral Christmas tree. Do we do Santa to make the season magical for our children, or do we not do Santa because we're teaching them to hold an idol, which that's a totally different conversation. Do we have matching Christmas jammies and matching Christmas stockings? Do we do the something they want, something to read, something to wear, something they need? We have gift guides for nature lovers, artists, homeschool moms, homeschool dads, the latest Montessori toy, and none of this is wrong, but it does make us consider, aren't we tired? I have to admit something. I'm not a Christmas person. I don't love the hustle and the hassle of the season. I've never cared for the obligations. I don't like the travel. Navigating an airport on the 23rd of December to get to somewhere else, otherwise, it's not actually Christmas, leaves me feeling exhausted. I get overwhelmed easily by chaos and clutter, and that's only exacerbated with the pressure of the must do's for the season. It always felt like this. Christmas was often paired with my dad being deployed, and you had tests and you had report cards coming out, so it never felt like a season of rest. My joy in the season really, or diminishing joy in the season really began in 2015. My daughter was 2 years old, and I had recently been diagnosed with an autoimmune thyroid condition called Graves' disease. And if you aren't aware, your thyroid is a gland that's in your neck, and it's part of your pituitary system. It regulates your hormones, your body temperature, your heart rate, and more. Unfortunately, mine was in overdrive. If untreated, Graves' disease can cause a medical complication called a thyroid storm that holds a fatality rate of 90% if it is not caught in time. After meeting with several doctors, we ultimately decided that my course of treatment would be a complete and total thyroid removal through surgery. At 26 years old, I was really hoping to preserve my fertility. My alternate course of treatment was to take a high dose of radioactive iodine, which kills the thyroid gland, but it can send you into early menopause. We knew that we wanted to grow our family, so we spent that Christmas preparing for the surgery in January. 3 months after my thyroidectomy, we were given the go ahead to try to have another baby. We were surprised to find out that we were expecting right away. As with any mother to be, I immediately downloaded the baby app that I had when I was pregnant with my daughter. I plugged in all of the information and I learned that we would be having a Christmas baby. And I was so excited to have a Christmas baby to accompany my Thanksgiving daughter. My mind started to spin with a whirlwind of planning. Which set of grandparents do we invite so that they could watch Nora while we were in the hospital? Do we induce? I was almost preeclamptic with my daughter, so we figured I would probably have to have an induction for the next pregnancy. And I thought about how busy we were going to be. We'd have 2 birthdays and Thanksgiving and Christmas, all within a 5 week span. And what do we buy a newborn for Christmas when it's their first day on Earth? A little more than a week later, we lost the Christmas baby. I went on to lose 3 more pregnancies before we were diagnosed with secondary infertility and reoccurring pregnancy losses. And on our baby's due date, I laid in the guest room of my in law's house and I sobbed my heart out. It was the repressed feeling of holding on to joy for the holiday season while also being around family and feeling like I should be home or in a hospital having a baby. I know I'm not the only person on this call who holds grief in what should be the most wonderful time of the year. Oh, I don't get through that. I haven't sobbed yet. So that's good. Usually I like burst into tears at this part of the story. So, um, the next year, when my daughter was 3, I bought 2 small winter doll ornaments at the Target dollar section, and in what I can only call my rebellion against the elf on the shelf, and a way to distract myself from imagining what a first birthday should look like. I wrote out 15 acts of kindness for my daughter and I to do. And I brought out these little dolls and I named them our kindness dolls. And every day they would bring a new act of kindness from St. Nicholas Day to Christmas. These were things like feed the birds, take cookies to the fire station, or make dinner for a friend of ours. The kindness dolls gave me something else to focus on. That Christmas morning, I woke up early and I went for a run. I let myself feel everything. I cried, I prayed, I processed, and then I came home to make Christmas breakfast with my husband. The next year, our kindness dolls returned, along with a new addition to our Christmas preparations, the Jessie tree ornaments. And every day, my daughter and I would walk through the story of Christ from the Old Testament to the Nativity, and we would focus on what we could do for others. I tried to ignore the heartache of waiting for our home study to be approved while we were in the middle of an adoption process. That Christmas morning was spent with my family in DC, and I woke up and I allowed myself to pray while I held tiny baby Christmas pajamas that I bought, just in case we got a call from our caseworker telling us that we should fly home. In 2018, I added an Advent devotional for myself for the first time. I was new to the Charlotte Mason method, and having a newly minted 5-year-old and an overenthusiastic spirit, I was looking for any way to infuse Charlotte's methodology into our home. We brought back our kindness dolls, a Jessie tree, and we added an Advent nature study every day. I let myself buy a fancy notebook and started painting for the first time. I think I probably prayed to be a more patient person at some point in my life, and God answered that prayer and gave me the opportunity to practice patience because our adoption process took a little over 3 years. We were in the middle of the busy Christmas season and we waited for a phone call that felt like it would never come. I started to find peace and rest in the Advent season, and it felt appropriate that I was waiting during a season of wait. Advent is a time of hopeful anticipation. Just like moms wait on pins and needles for their baby to be born, Advent is a time for us to wait and wonder at the coming of Christ. This is just as true as today as it was 2,000 years ago. Liturgically, Advent is the beginning of the church year and not the end. So it's all the more reason for us to stop, slow down, reflect, and to fill ourselves spiritually for the start of a new year. Advent is a time to prepare, but what are we preparing for? During our premarital counseling, my husband and I were advised to spend our engagement focusing on preparing for our marriage while we also planned our wedding. So we spent a lot of time talking about our budget and how many children we wanted and what the family dynamics would be with in laws and our faith. And we had a lovely wedding, but we have a beautiful marriage. What is Christmas without Advent? It's the preparation of presents, songs, activities, and meals. It's shopping for gifts. It's aesthetically pleasing and posting on Instagram and telling others what the book lists are that you're reading. And while we might read the Christmas story and attend a church service, there's more beauty to the preparation than to the day. Without Advent, Christmas is a day, but with it, Christmas is a season. The entire story can't be summed up in a single moment. It needs time to prepare in our hearts. We need time to feel what that joyful anticipation is at the coming of Christ. So, for the last several years, I've been focusing my heart on having specifically set aside time during the Advent season. I began with an Advent devotional years ago, and yes, I did. I started reading Watch for the Light in 2018, and I've read this for years since. I originally picked it up because C.S. Lewis is in here, and I will read anything that C.S. Lewis is mentioned in. Um, and then I started adding other aspects. When my daughter did her Advent nature study, I did it with her. I took time outside of my normal quiet devotional hours and specifically cultivated intentional aspects of my reading and reflection that helped me feel this joyful anticipation. I can't help but pour out to my children when I'm so full of good things. Over time, I would pick out other Christmas books just for me to read. I would listen to Advent hymns. I'd read through a gospel. I'd reflect on the meaningful things I could do for others, and then I would journal about it. In 2019, we welcomed our son home through domestic infant adoption. He is a constant joy, and his first Christmas held a unique pool of grief and gratitude. We were so thankful to have our miracle boy, while also knowing that there were other people who love him and wished that they could be with him as well. Our first visit with his birth mother was the week before Christmas, shortly after her parental rights were terminated. I spent that Christmas sharing photos with her on this photo app that we had where we could daily update her. And we would tell her all of the traditions we held and all of the things that he would grow up with. In that Advent, I needed time to prepare my heart and fill it with compassion to love her and her family as well. The need for an intentional Advent becomes even more necessary the busier we become. With my daughter dancing in the Nutcracker, With family visits, parties, and trips that we take, the season has become even more overwhelming. And it's all good. It's overwhelming in good ways, but it's a lot. When I couple that with the chronic pain diagnosis that I have, the relapse of my Graves' disease, and learning that I was losing the vision in my right eye, I did what any normal person would do, and I leaned harder into Advent. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis talks about ordo amoris, or the order of affections. It's the order of priorities that we have, what's most important to least important. And what I love about this is that we're not pitting things against each other. I'm not pitting the Nutcracker against reading the Bible. I'm not saying you should do kindness dolls and not Elf on a Shelf. These things are good for us to do, but there is a level of affection that we should have for them. In order not to crawl across the finish line of Christmas, we need to order these affections in an appropriate way. We can do cookies and read alouds and crafts, but we should also be spending time deeply in the Word. For me, it's necessary to spend intentional, set aside time in order to give to my children in an appropriate way. I've learned that the Lord will give us prompting in our lives as to what we want to consider next. And I have a very dear friend of mine who told me that while I'm given free will to make a choice, I can also walk in disobedience while making that decision. And last year, I felt a nudge to write down everything I do for Advent and put it out for other people to have. So I wrote a program called A Mother's Education Advent. And it is a Charlotte Mason program written specifically for mothers, not for homeschoolers, but for mothers that they can use to walk through the Advent season. I added in artist studies, hymns, and a book list that closely resembles what you might see with a Charlotte Mason student. We do poetry, nature study, read history, and then I put it all together. And this year, I've expanded into adding weekly Zoom calls where I can talk to other women about what we're learning. We can share our narrations, our commonplace, because we are meant to live within a community. The liturgical aspects of the Mother's Education program has served more than 200 women in the last 2 years. And the liturgical parts would be Lent and Advent. I have grown up celebrating Advent and observing it as seriously as I observe Lent. And I know when we start talking about liturgy and liturgical seasons, it can feel like a very Catholic thing. Um, and Lutheran, I'm not Catholic, but Advent is for everybody. It's not just a liturgical, like Catholic or Orthodox thing. So Advent is a season available to all Christians. Um, but I lean into it as seriously as I do Lent. Lent is also a time to reflect, and Advent gives us that reflection period. Enacting this aspect of my life, specifically designed for Advent, has been so fulfilling. It's been a joy to come together with other women and focus on Christ during a season that, specifically nowadays, is attempting to distract you. We constantly hear this narrative of keep Christ in Christmas. And I agree, we should keep Christ in Christmas, but the Christmas that many people celebrate is more of a secularized commercial version. The Advent season really gives us the chance to focus in on that. The point of the Mother's Education for me isn't to have a burdensome list of to dos. It really is to fill my soul with meaningful rest and give myself the hopeful anticipation of the coming of Christ. So, some of the things that I've been reading lately. Last year, I read a nature journal. So last year I read a book called The First Advent in Palestine. And while I haven't shared it in any program, I highly recommend it. It's a beautifully written book. I read a lot of Christina G. Rossetti because I love her poetry. And there are certain books that you read and certain people that you read from, and it just makes you a better person for reading them. And I think Christina G. Rossetti is one of those people. So this year I'm reading Waiting on the Word, and it's a poem a day from Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany. And it is beautifully written. There's commentary. And if you are a true Charlotte Mason educator, you would probably skip the commentary and form your own opinion on the poem, and that's totally fine. I'm reading Heaven and Nature Sing, and it's 25 reflections on nature during the Advent season. I am reading Louisa May Alcott, A Country Christmas and Other Christmas Stories. And I don't love Louisa May Alcott. I read Little Women, and it's my daughter's favorite book. It is not my favorite book. I have a theory about that I can share another time. But Louisa May Alcott is a good writer, and I feel like I am a better person for having read her. So I make myself read her. And then I'm reading Advent of the Lamb of God by Russ Ramsey. And if you have not read Van Gogh Has a Broken Heart and Rembrandt is in the Wind, I highly, highly encourage you to do that. It will change your entire life about artist study. So The Advent of the Lamb of God is a beautifully written book. I think Russ Ramsey is a fantastic writer, and I don't agree 1,000% with everything he says, but he has a very solid theological base, and I appreciate the things that he does right. I also started adding in Advent hymns that I listen to basically on repeat, and I play them for my children, and I started doing my own artist studies. So during Advent, I like to observe different paintings through time about the Nativity. And I know some people have opinions about which paintings they would observe of the Holy Family, and that is totally fine. So I won't show all of them, but I like seeing how different cultures and different styles of artists share their interpretation of the Nativity. So this is actually by Salvador Dali, and it's The Three Wise Men. So I'm making myself take the time out. I'm ordering my affections and giving myself the time to choose that there isn't anything, or there's no separation between the secular and the sacred. That Advent is a sacred and holy time in the church year. And in order for me to breathe a sigh of relief on Christmas night and feel like I have ended the season well, I need to make sure that I am pouring into all aspects of what Advent should be. It should be constantly looking towards the hopeful anticipation of Christ's coming. C.S. Lewis says that the fact that our heart yearns for something earth cannot supply is proof that heaven must be our home. I learned to navigate the feelings of joy and sorrow together that the season holds. It's a joy this side of heaven to hold hopeful anticipation of what the return of Christ will bring. And as moms, we get the chance to showcase that to our children. So making sure that I actually will read several of these books to my kids. I'll read the poem a day. I'll read Louisa May Alcott to them. But making sure that I'm showing them that Christmas is more than just the morning of. It is a season leading up to, and this is how I'm preparing my heart. Gives hopefully them the ability to enact that later in their life. So that is what I do. I believe taking the time during the liturgical season as a mom and truly filling yourself full of good and worthy thoughts and living ideas is one of the most important things that we can do as parents. I think if we can make all of the Christmas school crafts we want to, but if we end the season so burnt out, there I tell my husband this all the time. If my attitude, the attitude that I reflect to my children, is bad or it's poor or I'm frustrated or I'm snapping at them, it doesn't matter if we've baked beautiful Christmas cookies. It doesn't matter if we've watched all of the Christmas movies and did the book a day and the Jesse tree. If I have a bad attitude about it, and in order for me to, I always say this, like, not crawl across the finish line, in order for me to truly feel like I have spent this time preparing myself well, I have to do it in the word and what other people believe about the or think about the word and what other pastors are saying, and poetry that points me to Jesus. And Christmas stories of olden days are often beautiful and lovely, and it's sweet to reflect on that. So, as a mom, for me to give to my children during this season that can feel very stressful, taking the mornings, it's usually 20 to 30 minutes a day, and truly living in what is sacred is such a help for me. So,
Well, thank you so much, Beth. First of all, thank you for just opening up your heart and being so vulnerable with us and sharing your story, and how it led you to be intentional, specifically when it comes to the Advent season, that preparation, um, for his return. And it's something that we do not just in Advent, but pretty much whole of life.
yeah,
And all the steps and all the things that you do, in order to have your heart right, um, so that when that Christmas day comes, you've already spent all this beautiful time at the feet of Jesus, and engaging in beautiful, um, with beautiful ideas. So this is so wonderful. We have a couple of comments that I would like to read. Um, let's see. Chantel's from Colorado. So maybe you can
yes.
meet up sometime. Yes, Eva, we were all teary-eyed, and it's just a beautiful testimony that God uses everything for his glory, and your story is definitely something that he has used and will continue to use, um, to bring glory to his name. And everybody agrees. Thank you for sharing your story. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Beth? Don't be shy. Well, maybe one of the things is, where do we get the guide? That's
Yes.
helpful.
Um, yeah, so I have it on my website. It's a Mother's Education Advent 2024. I wrote one for 2023. Um, but the book list is new this year, and we've added the Zoom community aspect. So it's available at littleworldwanderers.com. Um, this week is the pre-reading week. So all of these books kind of have like an introduction to them. Um, and then next week we'll start the Advent readings. Advent this year, it's so nice and neat because it starts December 1st.
I
So
know.
it is nice that it like Sunday, December 1st. I'm like, oh, that is like the nice way to start the year.
I know, on the first day. So once someone purchases the guide, then do they get a link to join the
Yeah.
Zoom calls?
Yeah. So
I
I'll
think it's
send
nice
out,
that you have the community aspect so that you're not doing this on your own. You have accountability.
yes. Yeah, so I will send out an email to join in on the weekly chats. And then within the program, I also have aspects of what a Charlotte Mason education can look like for your own self. I know for me, I had a really hard time trusting what Charlotte said until I started doing it for myself. And I was like, oh, actually, a book of centuries does work to remember dates. When who would have thought that she knew what she was doing? So I have aspects of like journaling, and I explain where to get the journaling and how you can nature journal and how you can do a book of centuries. And my true hope for these types of programs, for the liturgical ones, it really is to immerse yourself in so much goodness that you feel full um,
Mm.
during the stressful seasons of the church year. My other hope is that it builds trust in mothers to take these elements and do them with their children, to see that it's not, education truly is an atmosphere, discipline, and a life. And you can take aspects of a Charlotte Mason education and enact it for your own sake. And it feels more natural to implement that with your children. It's hard. I know for me, it was hard to sit down and do like a nature notebook. And I was like, oh, this is like a hobby. Just like people sit down and needlework or garden. Like nature journaling can just be a hobby that I commit 20 minutes to a week. Um, so all of that information on keeping a commonplace and what Charlotte Mason says about scheduling and how to write out your own schedule. And then it also comes with, I break out the books per week so you can like keep track. Um, throughout the week. And then I offer your own scheduling pages. So you can write out your own schedule, and then weekly reflection pages. So you can see what living ideas you have and prayers that you have for the following week, things that were challenging, things you might need to change. It's like a mother's journal for your own self.
Oh, it's wonderful. And
Yeah,
if you go one every year, like you can see the growth and
yes. So
that's wonderful.
I've noticed for me, I've had a handful of things that I've said, I'm like, oh, I need to work on my own habit of attention. Like I'm trying to teach my children to have a strong habit of attention. I was like, oh, my attention's actually pretty poor right now. I should work on it. And I can see it written in my weekly reflections. I was like, I was doing that last week too.
So this is great. I encourage everyone to get this resource. I'm definitely going to get it for myself because I need a little push, even though I do my own things. It's always nice to have it all laid out. So that's half the battle. And the books that you mentioned, they're also listed there, the ones that you're
Yeah.
reading. That's wonderful. So what we'll do is I'll have this recording. I'll send it out to all of you with the link to purchase. And yeah, let's do this, ladies. Let's get our hearts ready for the Advent season and more to come. Anyone else have any questions or comments before we end? All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Beth. We're so blessed to have you.
Thank you for having
And,
me.
looking forward to other talks in the future.